Hey everybody, Jazzy here. Welcome to year 6 of Merm on the Moon, a solo Wurt series. Now this series has been almost exclusively in the beta branch of Don't Starve Together, and as of this year, we are in the Host of Horrors beta. I realize that lots of stuff changed by the time these betas got released, and I will try to make note of those changes as much as possible. I remember in Thrill of the Grill, almost every yearly recap started with a big wood harvest. But since Bearger tree farming is not going to be much of a thing for Wurt anymore, I need a new autumn tradition. What better way to reign in the new year by killing Fuelweaver? This will be Wurt's 3rd time fighting Fuelweaver, and for the first time, I can use double bone armor and 2 thermals. Not much damage taken with this much gear, and the more arena we cover in thermals, the fewer telepoofs we'll need to use. Bright Shade gear is perfect for Fuelweaver. The sword does extra damage versus shadow-aligned mobs, and the Bright Shade staff is dreamy for taking out the summons. For this fight, I'm going to use the Weather Panes because I wanted to practice more with the staff first. It accelerates the flow of the fight considerably, and this is one fight you want to be sure of what you're doing. I am exclusively using banana dishes for health and sanity. Not sure how much I'm going to need healing with double bone armors, but Banana Shake is great for sanity. I'm starting off wearing the Bee Queen crown, then when I tank during phase 2, I'm going to try to wear the Bright Shade crown as much as possible, just to keep that sweet 84 damage going. The one danger with the Bright Shade sword is that it will pop out of your hand slot if it gets to 0, and if you fill up your inventory to keep item swapping consistent, you can suddenly end up in this kind of awkward situation with a broken sword in your tooltip. It can take a bit of item juggling to get back in the fight, so just know that if you plan on using either the staff or sword in this fight, be prepared to do a lot of durability management. And don't let either get down to 0 if you can. Now Fuelweaver number 3 is dead. First thing I'm going to do is bring the Beeflo into the gateway room before I grease the Shadow Palm. This action will instantly reset the ruins and atrium, and Marguerite is not super keen on rooks. So we give 5 Dreadstone to the Shadow Hand, and this will start the Shadow Rifts. I have much less trepidation about this act compared to starting the Lunar Rifts. The only new world dangers will be Earthquake Boulders and Acid Rain, both of which can be much more easily managed than Bright Shades. Day 359, we're back home, and I'm ready to start working on my next build, a kitchen. This will almost always be my 2nd major build in a base. It's generally smaller than a chest zone, but just as important for long-term worlds. Now, I want to share a geometric placement trick that I learned from a viewer. I used to tell people that to find a good center point for a 6 crockpot setup on the hexagonal grid, you basically had to hunt around for a good tile center or corner. But you can actually set the grid in any spot you want. And you do this with the Snap Grid hotkey. Hitting this will set a grid point wherever your mouse cursor currently is. So here I'm setting the center to the halfway point between 2 tile corners. And then I could build all of my crockpots relative to that spot. By the way, here is my current favorite setup for quickly gathering turf. A Beefalo, a Turf Razor Helm, and a Lazy Forager. Anyone who has watched my recent Megabase streams knows that the vast majority of my nightmare fuel goes into the Lazy Forager, and my pigskin goes into antlion hats. The turf will fly out of the ground and into my inventory at a fraction of the speed it takes with a pitchfork. The trick is to fill your inventory up with items so that you don't accidentally pick up any random stuff that you don't need, which will clutter your inventory and waste durability on your forager. Now with my brand new kitchen, I can finally mass produce dragon pie with 6 crockpots. Cooking them with any fewer is just painfully slow. Now you can use twigs to cook dragon pie, but I'm hoping to use kelp as often as possible moving forward. Cam explained this to me recently, that when you cook a dish in a crockpot, the spoilage of the dish only takes into account the ingredients with actual spoilage. So if you can use 4 such ingredients, like kelp, then you'll get a much fresher dish. If you're going to use a food bundle, then it's not a huge deal, but I'm planning on using the polar bin, so I want to make sure that my dragon pie is as fresh as it could possibly be. As irritating as it is dealing with Bright Shades constantly, I do appreciate that this patch of grass is attracting most of the Bright Shade herds, and at this point I do want lots of husks, so I'll deal with this minor, constant inconvenience in exchange for the easy access. I've raided a bit of abandoned junk, and I deconstructed my 2nd Enlightened crown, so I'm gonna make the Warbus headgear. It's slightly better protection than a football helm, and also offers 5 planar defense. But its main perk is that while you're fighting a single mob, the damage output slowly increases, up to 20% extra damage after 2 seconds. Now, I'm making this piece first because I'm really hoping that it will apply the extra damage to a Beefalo. So I'm going to give it a test drive versus Dragonfly. Unfortunately, it seems that the perk does not transfer to a Beefalo, and that's probably for the best. I do not deserve to be headbutting for 79 damage with a War Saddle. Would have been fun, but for non-Beefalo fights, I'm sure we'll find some decent uses for it. In preparation for winter, I'm going to make some hostile flares so that I can summon Deerclops right away and kill the third mutant boss. And now it's time! Or so I thought. I'm picking a spot in the Triple Mac biome, throwing down a sign for bait, and firing off a flare. And here comes Deerclops. Its behavior has changed slightly since the beta. You can still run around to dodge the attack, but it tracks the player for a split second, so it's not quite as easy to dodge this way with normal movement speed. With a walking cane, it's still doable, just a smaller kiting window. And in comes the ultimate troll! NANI? The rift closed as I was fighting Deerclops. This is so frustrating because now I need to wait for the next rift to fight armored Clops. I mean, it's still early winter, so I can summon Clops again in like 5 days, but imagine if this happened with Bearger. If I kill Bearger when the rift is closed, then I gotta wait until next year to get the Spark ARK. Mumbling about time-locked progression comprises a substantial chunk of my stream discussions. So I will take out my rage directly onto Kloss while 'tis the season. Pog moment for the poopy loot! An eyeball. A blueprint I already have, and the absolute thickest of furs. While waiting for the next rift to open, I am herding all the grass geckos I've made into a pen. I built the pen near water so that eventually I can grow a waterlog tree so Glommer and the geckos can be forever safe from lunar hail. When we get more updates on the sheltering mechanics and the hail damage returns to mobs, I'm hoping that we will have more options for setting up shelters more inland. Luck would have it, I stumbled across the next rift as it was opening. It's kind of an awkward location, like it's pretty close to my base, but at least I'll be able to visit it easily and grab a bunch of pure brilliance. But that'll have to wait for later because this means it's time for Deerclops again. First thing we do with armored Clops is we run around until it tosses both ice spikes. And then we take out its eye shard with the fire staff. Then we can wail on it with our bright shade sword while it's stunned. Now during the beta this was the entirety of the fight, just bait 2 attacks and then fire staff for the stun. But after the beta, they introduced this frenzy phase where Clops would attack multiple times in a row, and it stays in this phase for at least 20 seconds and until you can do another 1200 damage, at which point it will regrow its eye crystal and you can stun it again after it tosses 2 more back crystals. And now the moment has arrived. Wurt gets her very first Spark ARK. I know exactly the first item I want to make with it as soon as we charge it up. But first I want to summon another Clops. In the beta you got 1 Spark ARK after killing all 3 bosses, so since I just killed the third, I can proceed to kill all 3 again, starting with Deerclops. And this way I can kill another Varg, then Bearger again, and in autumn I can get a second Spark ARK. It's day 381, the cave rifts are open, and I am so ready for an umbrella. So it's time to go hunt for inkblights. They're really easy to find. You just run over to a fissure and a dreadstone outcrop should appear. Now this is one of the best fights for a bright shade staff. Each projectile will do 20 planar damage towards shadow-aligned mobs, and with the helm, each attack bounces around for a total of 7 hits. So here we're talking 140 planar damage per use. The blights have a combined total of 3000 HP, so that's what, like 22 hits of the staff? It's incredibly effective, and it makes the fight so much less painful than it can be with melee weapons. Our main destination in the caves is the archives. You charge the Spark ARK by dropping it on the ground so that it can trap a security post. It's a bit out of our way, but well worth the trip. I'm hoping that eventually I can get enough pure horror and tatters from the inkblights to not ever need to fight shadelings at the rift. But for now, I do need some extra pure horror to craft what I need, so I'm stopping by the rift on the way out of the caves for a bit of farming. The bright shade staff works against these mobs, but they disappear after a few hits, and the staff is not super effective against just one target. So I ended up just headbutting a couple of shadelings until they died. One other downside of the staff is that the bounces will sometimes target neutral mobs, which is how a bunny man got accidentally attacked right here. So just be careful when fighting around a group of mobs if you don't want all of them ganging up on you. Back on the surface, day 383, Wurt is crafting her first Spark ARK item. Last episode I said the Bright Shade Sword is my second favorite item from the Rift content, and my absolute favorite item is the Polar Bearger Bin. probably one of the most impactful items to hit the late game since the Enlightened Crown. This item has 6 inventory slots and can be opened or closed like a spectacular box. Any crockpot dishes can be stored inside the bin, and these dishes will last 20 times longer than their default spoilage. 20 times longer! Even for a character such as Wurt, with less incentive to eat crockpot dishes, the convenience of this item will still make mass cooking incredibly beneficial. When Dragon Pie suddenly lasts 300 days, I can throw 3 stacks of it into the bin and live out of it for 120 days before any of it even turns stale. In spring, it's time for another possessed Varg. This fight went a lot smoother because I didn't get frozen, even though a majority of my Merms were for most of the fight. Getting that stun with a melee planar weapon is kinda tricky because of all the hounds running around. It's easy to lose your target with so many mobs in close proximity. I'm thinking the Bright Shade Staff would have helped to stun because even if I targeted a hound, the projectile would have eventually bounced to the Varg, and you only need 2 planar hits to stun. Also, this spring, I'm setting up an area that will eventually be a future farm zone, and I want to build this in a way that it will be safe from bright shades. To do this, I'm going to plant a couple of berry bushes that will attract bright shades, and once they get infested, that will create a radius nearby in which other plants will be safe. If you're interested in the mechanics of bright shade spawning and how to control where they spawn, you absolutely have to watch Locknish's video on the topic, arguably the most important video ever made about bright shades. I only have one chance to decorate the area around these berry bushes. Once they get infested, it's going to be impossible to work around the bright shades. So I'm setting up a few walls and fences. I'd love to decorate with items, but the vines will move them around, so I can't really. I finally get a Lord of the Fruit Fly spawn, and I want to kill it for a friendly fruit fly, but unfortunately, it started hailing right as I killed the boss. I thought that just standing next to the fly would protect it from hail, but you actually needed to deploy it on the ground. By the time I got on my Beefalo, dropped the umbrella, and deployed it, the fly would likely be dead anyways, so I just ran away. Patting myself on the back for that call because the little guy actually survived after being unceremoniously spawned into a particularly hostile world. I made a little boo-boo and planted some dragon fruit seeds in my temporary farm after the next rift opened. Since I'm trying to get bright shades on my berry bush trap, I should have just waited until they got infested, but as long as they're here, I will leave them because I'm fairly certain there are absolutely no other plants they can possibly infest. And while I'm waiting on that little project, I'm gonna work some more on a build for my 2 rift crafting stations. I'm using Moon Crater Turf for the Bright Smithy and Mutated Fungal Turf for the Shadow Plinth, and eventually I'll decorate with structures and plants that correspond to each affinity. I'm squeezing in a bit of scale farming before summer, but I also want to kill Dragonfly before I go to the ruins. This fight is really sloppy and fun with Merms and a Beefalo. I can bait the larva around until they die, while the Merms keep wailing on the boss. Blow the pan flute when she enrages, and then just repeat. I should probably still wall off the lava ponds because even though I distract the larva, the Merms keep getting set on fire from the ponds, and eventually they just burn to death. If I can end the fight quickly, it's fine, but the longer it stretches out, the lower my chances of great success. In summer, I finally get to enjoy the full power of Bright Shade gear versus Antlion. With a sword and a helm, that doubles as goggles in the sandstorm. I'm deploying the umbrella because it's still in the beta and hail happens like forever. And sure enough, the hail doth fall halfway into the fight. Also, if I recall correctly, bone armor used to not absorb hits from hail. And this is not a fight during which you want to get stun locked. But I can't tell you how nice it feels to use bone armor for this fight and not worry about being unarmored during a cooldown. Now it's time for some ruins clearing. While I'm down here, I'm going to grab the blueprint for the replica relic chair from the sacred chest at the station set piece. I need to build one of these for Pearl so she'll take pity on my masonry skill and give me the sawhorse blueprint. I could have also attacked the sitting horror on one of the relic chairs down here, but I like doing the combination of items in the chest. Even if just to be in complete awe of how the community ever managed to figure out these puzzles. I'm doing the majority of clearing with my Beefalo, switching between 2 bone armors for bishops. When it's the nightmare phase, I wear a bone helm and proceed to kill clockworks as usual. It's just terrifying being surrounded by so many terror beaks that would absolutely shred my Beefalo if I accidentally switched to Moggles. The Beefalo did get low health while fighting rooks, so I'm backing off to heal it with daiquiri. And it came as an enormous surprise to me that Beefalo will not eat daiquiri. This is because apparently it is a goodies type dish, similar to jelly beans and ice cream. But wait a minute, Banana Pop and Banana Shake are both veggie dishes, but daiquiri is not? That's a little strange because based on the ingredients, it's basically banana pop without a twig. I mean, it's cool that Wigfrid is willing to set aside her vehement dietary choices to knock back a completely vegan cocktail, but it sucks that beef will have to be so straight edge. So in the name of personal preservation, I will feed it dragon pie. It's still nice that the two of them have a mostly overlapping diet. After killing all the damaged clockworks, I'm going back through and clearing all the structures. The Bright Shade Smasher is the perfect tool for this job. It can mine the statues, hammer the stations, and hammer the broken clockworks. It can also be repaired with a kit, and this fact alone means I'm saving on needing to bring 4 different crafting materials to the ruins just to make hammers and gold pickaxes. It's one of the biggest quality of life improvements to ruins clearing we've seen in quite a while. And none of that even touches on the unbelievable effectiveness of Bright Shade gear in the ruins. Extra damage to clockworks, immunity to darkness, and use a single item to repair all of it: your weapon, your armor, and your tools. It saves so many resources and it frees up a ton of inventory. I love Bright Shade gear if you haven't noticed. Towards the end of summer, I'm fighting Ancient Guardian on foot. With Bright Shade helm plus sword, I'm hitting phase 1 for 76 damage, but in phase 2, it becomes shadow aligned, and now we're doing 84 damage. It got me thinking, how cool would it be if the boss at the end of the current content arc changed its alignment across multiple phases of the fight? I love the idea of having to use different strategies for different phases. I think it makes for some of the best boss fights in any game. Do more fights like Ancient Guardian. I think it's cool. And that's it for year 6. Next time we will get another Spark Arc, we will finish our safety farm, we will move the Merms into the Oasis, build a beach for the king, and enjoy our very first death. Hope you enjoyed the recap, and see you next time.